Hi, this is Mike Friedman, and I'm here today with Rosa Reynoza. She's a candidate for the town council in the upcoming May special election. And we're here today to have a conversation about two important topics to the town. One is the financial outlook, both in the short term and the long term for the town. And the second is the proposed town green project. The format of this is conversation is a little bit different. It's going to be conversational, and the idea is to try and get into these two issues a little bit more deeply so that we can get a sense of both the knowledge that Rosa has, as well as how she will be prepared if she's elected to join the board, because these issues will come before her very quickly. And finally, how she views these particular topics. So before we get into the weeds, Rosa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. Rosa Reynoza here. I'm been in Windsor since 1979. My parents moved here with myself and my four sisters, but even before that, I have pictures going back since I was an infant because my grandparents moved here in 1972. So very proud of being a West Side Windsor resident and going to all the public schools here in Windsor, although I went to Hillsborough High School because Windsor High School wasn't here yet. So I feel really connected to both communities. And so I've been in the wine industry since I was a high school and senior, actually. I got it through my accounting class I was taking in high school. So I've been very involved in the wine industry and in all different departments. And my last job was as a business manager for Jackson Family Wines, and I was there with them for 10 years. So I have a lot of experience working with them, managing big budgets, working with large crews of employees. And I got involved with the town council about 2015, 16, and I ran my first race. And I'm still here. I'm still giving it a shot. I really feel that we need diversity on our council. We still need some new voices that represent the working class. So that's what I'm here to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Rosa. That was very, very informative. Let's start with the financial outlook for the town. In January, the town council got some sobering news from its financial consultants who projected that the town will run both a short and long-term revenue gap for at least the next 10 or 15 years. Since that time, the town's gotten good news. Some things have changed, the biggest of which is that the federal stimulus COVID bailout package looks like it will send about $5 million to the town. So my question at the start is, does the town have a problem, or is there no longer a problem? And, please, try and be specific, either way, let us know what the problem is, or if there's no longer a problem, why it's gone away. Thank you.
So yeah, I attended that meeting back in January. I try to attend almost every budget special meeting that the town has. And I'd like to say I was surprised or shocked, but I've heard that before. I started, I think I could go back to 2018 and I could find some records, some videos of us talking about the decline, especially in our general fund, and so the idea that we possibly could be in the red, depending what happens with the stimulus money, it's not a good thing. I really think that our town had a head start in knowing that we needed to tighten our budget and do some maybe cut back on some expenses. I think our town tends to be a little bit excited about promoting events and tourism. And I think we should really be focused on building a really sound financial balanced budget so that we have access to a lot of the wonderful things that we already do, but to maintain them for long term.
So you said that
yeah.
you had attended the meeting.
Mhm.
Did you get a sense of what was causing the revenue gap? Is it that we're
Well,
spending too much money, or are our revenues not keeping in? What's going on?
so the main thing that I understood from the meeting was that how expenses are going to be rising, and the main one was the CalPERS. I believe that's how you say it. So our insurance, all the fees being paid towards. Oh, I had it here. Yeah, but CalPERS
Yeah,
insurance.
and
Yeah,
CalPERS, just for folks, is basically pension payments
yeah.
covering the employee pensions.
Yeah, so that's really not in our control. But again, I've heard that before. I've heard the rates are going up. And so to me, that should have triggered some changes, some more being a lot more conservative with our funds a few years back. And there's in my world, there's always small cutbacks we can make. And I've actually spoken up at meetings, and I'm trying to save $10,000 here, 10,000 there. And they've snickered at me at meetings. And to me, I'm like, no, if there is a resident who has an idea and we can save $10,000 here, $20,000 there, I would definitely be open to those kinds of ideas, because they can make a difference in the long run.
Do you have a sense of the size of the revenue gap?
This, gosh, I want to say 3 to 4 million. I can't remember.
Is per year, or total over the period?
No. I want to say per year, because I think that's what I was looking at, but I'm not sure.
Okay. What I recall from the presentation and going back over it was the initial projections were $18 million over 10 years, or basically $1.8 million a year. So if you count in the $5 million that we may be getting from stimulus funds, that should bring it down to 13 million, or 1.3 a year. And then they also talked about not having accounted for any projections for TOT, or hotel tax, from the McClelland Hotel,
Mhm.
which if it goes online in 23, 24, they thought would bring in about $650,000. And then you're right that there was also a reference to increased insurance costs,
Mhm.
and some favorability on improving the sales tax projection. And so
Right.
all in all, it looked like there was, starting out a $1.3 million a year deficit, counting in the stimulus money, followed by an additional 650 or 650,000, factoring in those other factors, which means we have to make up about 650,000 a year, in order to sort of get back to neutral. Is that something, and that's a long-term kind of thing, is that something that you would consider merely doing by trying to cut expenses, or would you try and raise revenue? Would you try and do a little bit of both?
Definitely a little bit of both. I think you have to do a little bit of both. You definitely can't hit, example, sales tax. You can't hit our residents, expect them to pay more. But I just want to add, we also have to think about, the police department did a report, and they might need some more people to increase their coverage of Windsor. Our fire department is going to need some support. So we have to really keep in mind all that. It's interesting how they can present our expenses and revenues and talk about revenues and what we can do to build it, which is fine. It's great. But I would like to see make sure that we expand what our future expenses are possible, because you know, I think the more honest and transparent we are on what could possibly happen down the road, I think it's better. It's better for everyone to really understand. So I
So,
attended the last
so
town council meeting, sorry.
go ahead, finish up.
And we also talked about raising, getting TOT from the bed and breakfast places, the Airbnbs. And so that is going to actually make a big difference, bigger than the town is projecting, because they only have like 34 units that have permits to run a business like an Airbnb. But we have this wonderful nonprofit organization, Generation Housing, and they did a report and they're thinking we have like 134. So there's definitely a lot of revenue out there that we can pull from people running these Airbnbs in Windsor.
On the spending side, you know, you talked about, you know, cutting 10,000 here, cutting 10,000 there. Do you have a sense of, you know, from a big budget standpoint, where the town spends its money, what portion goes to sort of
Yes.
the big
Yeah,
pieces?
the biggest is the police department. It's over 30%, I believe. And so I know that that's a difficult thing to do, especially because we pride ourselves, the town, on our safety. And so that's one of the biggest. The other one, which I'm not sure where it falls into, is the consultants. We spend so much money on consultants. And I brought that up at meetings before, where we have so much talent on our staff that it'd be nice to really tap into that, but not only to that, but to our nonprofits. For example, Generation Housing sent in a letter and someone spoke at the last meeting. It's like, let's partner up with them instead of finding a big business that to do some kind of survey or whatever. Let's ask Generation Housing to join us in our efforts to really come up with a good plan for the future for Airbnbs. But there's so many other nonprofit organizations that we can consult with, especially for our fire safety, emergencies. I'd like to see that. I'm a social servant, I guess. So I'm very involved with nonprofits. So I would like to see us tap into those resources more as we go forward. And I think that would cut some funding needs in that area also.
But do these nonprofits typically have the, you know, the expertise in actually generating studies and reports, or, you know, are they more on the execution side?
Well, here's my thing with the consultings. I think we can start with the nonprofits, because I've seen us bring in consultants, engineers, and then they just sit there for years and years, and we don't move forward on some of the development, for example, the overpass of the freeway, and which is probably a little bit more technical than this one should be. But I'm just thinking that as a starting point, it just, I don't know. That's something I'd really like to look into more and work with our staff in our town and just really dig into that. Another one is getting more requisitions when we have putting things out to bid. Sometimes I get concerned that we're using the same company year after year, and I'd like to see competitive bids. I know local businesses who would love to be able to do business with the town, and they don't get an opportunity very often. So I think that's another option to reduce costs, is to put things out to bid more often.
Interesting ideas. And then you also talked a little bit about, you know, shifting some of the workload from consultants back onto staff. Do we really have extra staffing to take that up? My impression was that a certain amount of using consultants was, in a sense, outsourcing, you know, to, you know, specific expertise, where you only need it for the length of time, and then, you know, you sort of move on.
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, from where I sit, you know, I'm not 100% sure if we have enough staff. I I would definitely be working with the town manager and finding that out. And that's something that I think, some of my ideas, I think outside the box, I want to look into it. And I think having someone like me who will ask those questions and want to dig into it, I think that's a good thing. I don't think it should be something scary that people are like, oh no, those are crazy ideas, or she's going to shake things up, or I'm not sure. Yeah.
I agree with that, but this is a discussion about financials and the financial outlooks. And so, it really gets down to, do you have a plan? If there's a shortfall over the next period of time, you'll come on board if you get elected. And in May, the 2-year budget cycle begins. And, as part of that, you're going to be looking at the long-term outlook as well. And decisions will have to be made. And, yes, a lot of what you've talked about is good philosophy of when this thing comes up or that thing comes up. But I'm not really sure how that applies to the budgeting process, and, how in the long term you ensure that the rate of revenue growth, is potentially increasing to equal the rate of of spending. Because, as you said, the bulk of our spending is not on consultants and those things. It's on salaries for regular staff. It's on policing and the like.
Right.
And so, if those have a long-term higher rate of cost than what we're bringing in, that's, you run into a problem.
Right.
So I wonder if you have a plan.
So I would like to see our TOT percentage go up for our hotels. I would definitely want to make sure our Airbnbs are registered, so we get TOT from them, and they'd be required to have a registration number. So we would obviously be able to know if someone is having an Airbnb that's not registered. Another thing that's going to be pretty out there, and I don't even know if there's any possible way of reversing it, but we could save in our bonds, which is going to be $300,000 per year for the roundabout on Windsor River Road, Windsor Road. I was opposed to that project, and if there's any way to reverse it and stop it, I kind of would like to, and that would give us that savings.
Okay. And final question before we move on, that an 8th cent town tax added to the sales tax. Windsor is one of the few towns in Sonoma that has no additional add to the sales tax. If you go down to Santa Rosa, it's above 8.25% and the like. If we added an 8th cent to the 8.25 sales tax, that on our current sales tax revenues, which is about 500 million, would generate $650,000 a year. And that would basically be the gap that the financial consultants were projecting. Would you consider such a tax?
Yes, I definitely would consider it. I think, it not only Windsor shops in Windsor, so we have to know that the people visiting, they can contribute to us by increasing that sales tax when they shop here. So definitely.
Yeah, you certainly would guess that a fair amount of that 500 million is from either business to business or outside of Windsor coming in.
Right.
Okay, so I think that wraps it up for talking about financials for today. Enough weeds on that. Why don't we move on to having a discussion about the Town Green project? That's obviously another big project that is going to be coming up very shortly to the town council, and certainly over the next 6 months. The next member, who's voted in the special election, will have a big impact on, what happens there. So I'd like to just start out and see if you have a position on the project.
So I do have a position. I've had a position for a long time. I'm on record opposing it. When I started, I actually grew up across the street from the Huerta gym. And I remember looking out the window and being so excited that someday I'm going to go to that junior high. But that didn't happen. But I also know that especially just the Huerta gym itself, it holds a lot of connections to our Latino community. And it's also a very inexpensive place to rent to have events. So those were my first thoughts. And then I got into the survey. The town of Windsor did their own survey asking the residents how they felt about tearing down the gym. And it was about 60% said no. So in my eyes, well, okay, that is above more than half, 60%. So I'm like, of course we shouldn't tear it down then. But that's not the direction the town council is going. So I definitely stood up and I said, this is why we need to stop it. If it's going to go forward and I'm sitting on the council and I get to have this discussion with them, we need to rethink what they're, so number one is, do we do anything at all? I would say no. If we're going to do something, okay, what's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? And I stand out there often and I look around and I try to imagine what they're putting in and what they've shared with us. And it just doesn't feel right. It feels out of place. And so if the town is going to try to convince me, or someone wants to convince me to change my mind and vote for it, it's going to take a whole different plan, because I still see mixed use. I see we right now the plan is only high end. None of our children would be able to afford one of the residential units there, at least not my family. So we really have to rethink the whole layout of it. And I think the only way of doing that is going to be a different developer, because this developer does all what I've seen, only high end.
I understand what you're saying. It sounds like you're starting out with, in terms of, being opposed to the project, that you have some different goals for, the downtown, for the town green, for, what might go there. If I'm hearing you correctly, your preference would be leave things as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And for the sake of, you think that that's a better fit with the town character than what is proposed.
Right. Correct.
Can the proponents of the project are trying to balance sort of three goals and execute on all three goals. One being to sort of complete on a long-term vision, that the town green is encircled by commercial and residential properties. Two is that we upgrade and the Civic Center buildings without without cost to the residents of the town. And three is to expand the revenue base for the town, while at the same time improving providing more beneficial business outlook to the businesses downtown. What do you think of those three goals? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? How do you balance them against the other goals that you may have for the project?
So I'm going to go backwards a little bit, because you might have to remind me of the first one. I was trying to remember all those. So increasing our revenue. So what I was trying to say in the beginning was that, I've been watching and looking at all the revenue that we've been receiving, especially the TOT revenue, because that gets pushed a lot. We need more revenue, and we need more hotels to get more TOT. And like I've said, I've been following the budget, and there's been increase of revenue over the last 8 years. I think we were making 500,000 in about 2008, $500,000 in TOT taxes. And then 2016, 17, right before the fires, we were up to 2.5 million in TOT. So we've had a steady stream of increases, pre-pandemic, pre-fires of TOT. And I think they can keep going up as Windsor becomes more of a destination for its family-friendly, quiet town, which is what my goal. That's a destination I want for Windsor. I think we'll see more and more.
Do you have a sense though of, who's actually staying in town? Are they just the sort of the middle layer of the wine tourism business, or is it people primarily coming in to, be extended families with Windsor residents, or?
Well, I don't have a sense. I wish there was some way, maybe there is a way of tracking that, but I do hear from different people, like for example, our older adults will say they don't want to sell their big home to get into a smaller unit because when their family comes over, they want them to have a place to stay instead of an expensive hotel. But I also have seen and heard families coming into town visiting, and they love it here. They love the quietness. They love, staying at the local hotels. And so it's interesting. But so the revenue, my thing is that they can keep talking, saying we need more revenue, But for me, the real discussion will be, well, what are we doing with those funds, with those expenses, or what are we doing with the revenue? What are we spending the money on? Because
right, and so for that, maybe we can switch over to that second goal, which is to have the project generate revenue for the town so that it could pay for upgraded Civic Center building.
Well, I'm into. I don't think we need upgraded buildings, and what's that going to cost us? I don't think we've had a really good layout of those costs. And another thing I want to point out is one of the buildings they want to build is for a police department. And when I get on council, I want to take a tour of the water district building on Windsor Road across from the high school, because that idea came up a few years back because it's a gated yard, and they talked about how the police need a place so they don't. Anyways, that's gated, and so especially with COVID and many people working from home, I just wonder. I guess I have a lot more. I need to be in there. I need to look around. I need to see what's possible and what we can create without having to tear down these buildings, which to me, they look like they have 10, 20 more years of life.
But don't sort of town buildings historically have a natural life cycle, whether it's because of, new building standards, things like the sheriff's building needing to be, seismically, up to date and those kinds of things. Plus just the fact that if we're going to get more residents in Windsor, we're going to need to expand staff. Now, on the flip side, the town has seemed to weather the COVID pandemic pretty well in terms of still being very productive, still being effective, and getting a lot of pats on the back, deservedly so, town staff from the town council for functioning largely at home. So have you also looked at some more of a hybrid style that maybe either changes the magnitude of the buildings that we need to build, makes them more multi-use, and or is a hybrid of what you're saying, which is pour more money into old buildings that are getting on in their years versus something that's going to last us a long time.
Right. Well, I didn't say pour more money into old buildings. I just think I know that there's been repairs and maintenance that happens in all buildings, but definitely a hybrid model is something we need to look at. But let me just step back a little bit. Again, when I look at the town green and those buildings, yes, they're not the prettiest. And yes, they're getting old. But another thing that we have right there that not many towns is just the openness, the feeling, the trees. And I really want to balance that out. I feel that, there's that empty lot across the street by Oliver's. What kind of developer can we find there that might build something a little bit different for the town? But the Civic Center, with all the banners that we have on all the posts of our military families, again, the trees, the flags, it's also that part. I know people look at it, and I went to a meeting where they talked about this footprint of property, the tax that we can make off it is so high, and they want to take advantage of that. But I feel like that's not always the right direction. We don't have to always do that with our lands, our properties.
Okay, I hear you. I'm going to cut you here because
Okay.
I'm gonna shift the topic slightly.
Yeah.
If you're elected,
Mhm.
the current project plans will come before you. And they obviously, because it's looking at using the performance of the hotel, basically how well the hotel generates revenue to fund the building of the Civic Center buildings, that's going to end up as a very complex financial transaction and agreement. And so and you're going to need to review that, whether you're for or against the project,
Mhm.
and make some representation on how much risk you think is involved, and whether the risk is worth the reward.
Mhm.
Um, what what experience do you have in sort of doing any of that, of analyzing such complex financial agreements, in order to figure out, where the holes are?
Right. So I just need to throw this in there. I definitely want that report to be from someone independent. I really hope that the town will find someone that has no connection to the developer. I just, so that's number one. Number two, as
Well,
a, as a bit,
just to cut
yeah,
in there, I'm sorry, just
that's
to cut
okay.
in, that I think they're going to use the same consultant that they used to do the preliminary report. Is that your understanding?
I heard somewhere, and I'd have to look back, but I thought I heard somewhere that Robert Greene was going to present the financial feasibility report. So I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll find
So
out in
yeah,
April.
we'll find out. Yeah, and so as a business manager at Jackson Family Wines, I looked at contracts. I didn't really look at bids, but I did look at contracts. Um, so I reviewed them. Definitely, it was not the same. It wasn't, revenue versus expenses. But I do have experience looking at contracts. I do have experience reconciling numbers, looking for mistakes, looking for, and I want to, Michael Friedman, I don't know if you remember, but you and I were sitting at the board meeting when we caught a mistake on one of the reports where they didn't transfer the right number from one list to the next. And so I feel like I pay attention, and I will go through these reports.
So where do you see, oh,
Yeah,
where
go
do you
ahead.
see the biggest risks, that you're going to have to pay attention to?
Well, the biggest risk is really finding out where they're getting their numbers from, because the skyrocket in building, like that's the biggest thing, is really trusting that what they're saying it's going to cost to build something is going to be there 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because that's how long it's taking to build anything. And so if they're telling us today it's going to cost $1.5 million to build this library, and it doesn't happen for 3 years. Yeah. So that's the biggest thing, is to really make sure they're counting for inflation as things go up, or as time moves, and it takes longer to build something. The roundabout, is another one. Anyways, that's another subject.
Yeah, yes, it is. And in fact, that's pretty much all the time we had for that topic. So let's wrap it up here. Thank you very much. That was very informative. Yeah, it was nice to be able to go into these two topics on a much deeper level than we normally do. And I really appreciate giving me the time to chat with you today.
Thank you. I hope we do it again.